Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You can notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. The purpose for this special meeting is for the discussion and voting on the candidacy of the superintendent finalists. To close out the process, the only thing that we haven't let the public have privilege to yet is the site visits to the finalist school districts. I'm going to be starting off with Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Murphy, who visited the New Bedford Public Schools, the schools for Dr. Anthony Azar. So, Chris, if you want to take it out of the gate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I went to visit the New Bedford school system to discuss Dr. Azar's candidacy. Everybody I spoke with in New Bedford universally spoke of him as a unifier of different camps, a collaborative leadership style. They also talked about him as a great diffuser of stress and tense situations. You know, if you had two camps really separated on any given issue, and this was across the day with every administrator and principal, teacher, everybody I talked to, basically said the same thing, that he was really great at diffusing the tension between two different camps on any subject. As far as his successes go, they talked a lot about the Success Center, which did a lot to reduce their dropout rate. But he's a mid-level, upper mid-level curriculum administrator. So he was in charge of running director meetings around curriculum, which I guess were very, stressful situations on a regular basis. And apparently he's been very good at keeping everybody on the same page and running those meetings efficiently and keeping their focus on the kids. So it's all everybody spoke very highly of him. It was really amazing. So, a sort of human interest thing that they threw in at lunchtime. One of their lunch, their cafeteria staff came to this country from Cape Verde, and apparently when she got here, she could not read or write English. And when Dr. Azar found out, he made sure that either he or other people in the community in New Bedford got her the education she needed to learn how to read and write English, and also get her citizenship in the United States. So it was an extremely heartwarming story in terms of his ability to solve an individual person's problem directly and follow up. And that was the other thing that came up over and over again, was follow up. One of the things he is apparently great at is researching any given problem and then following up with the solution to that problem later. So that pretty much covers everything that I saw across the day in New Bedford.
Thank you, Chris. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I visited New Bedford on about a few days after Mr. O'Neill because of a scheduling conflict, and my visit was very consistent with the report that Mr. O'Neill just shared. The characteristics that the representatives from New Bedford shared generally centered around the supportive nature of Dr. Azar's leadership and the collaborative nature of his leadership style. There was the agenda called for meetings with mostly the same individuals that Mr. O'Neill met with, so not surprising that the message was relatively consistent, although there were a couple of changes. And generally, the narrative that was formed was one about Dr. Azar's focus on children and support of educators throughout New Bedford. I did not get over to the cafeteria where the new citizen was working. Instead, there was a student-run eatery in the basement of the administration building. I don't know that it compares to the Apprentice Cafe in Attleboro, but it was still nonetheless a good opportunity to meet with individuals who had worked with Dr. Azar over a long period of time. And again, the message was very consistent with what Mr. O'Neill shared.
Any questions from the committee to the committee member? Okay. Next will be the site visit for the West Warwick Public Schools. Their superintendent, Mr. Ken Swin. It was Ms. Furtado and myself attended the site visit, and Brenda is going to give the overview of the site visit for the day.
Okay. I went to the West Warwick schools, and me and Mr. Tyler went in. We met Mr. Sheehan at his office, the admin office, and from there we spoke to their IT specialist who handles their transportation. We spoke with their assistant superintendent. We spoke to their special education director. And first I want to just mention for the atmosphere. When I went into the administrative office and the schools, the first thing when I walked into the schools, I felt family. I felt family. It was friendly. They were happy. The morale was high. There was no tension, and it was very, very warm. So that was one thing that I felt as soon as I walked into any school and the administration office. When we sat there and we spoke with the IT gentleman, they spoke about how important Mr. Sheehan felt that technology is. So that was a huge bonus for me when I heard that, because I know that that is a big thing that Attleboro parents, everybody is looking for, is the IT in the Attleboro Public Schools. When they spoke about Aspen, I asked them how their Aspen system worked. They said it was great. They had no glitches. There was one principal when we sat down mentioned that if a parent called, he pushes one button, the profile comes up. He could speak to that parent one-on-one, knowing the student's history. The other thing too was in Aspen, they do have a transportation department that is off-site, like they contract out, but they are part of the Aspen system, where all of the, for the transportation, all the routes and everything is connected to the Aspen, where if it's a new route that needs to be put in, a new child, it's entered, it's dispersed between the two, and they're all on the same page. If they need to print out routes for the bus drivers, they use the Aspen system. Everything is there. Nothing's hand calculated. They were right on top of with the IT and with the Aspen system. The assistant superintendent, she's part-time. She couldn't say, she handled more of the policies, pretty much the policies for the district that she helped Mr. Sheehan. She said that he's wonderful to work with. He made it flexible for her to be working there part-time with the situation that she had. So I thought that was, and again, probably, well, and with their budget and what they needed, a part-time person worked, but she said he was very flexible, worked with her hours. She got what she needed to get done, and he was happy, and they were always on the same page, always in connection together. Let's see, we did meet with school committee members. We met with 2 of them. The relations with the school committee was phenomenal. He's very transparent. He's very open. He had a wonderful, wonderful rapport with all of them. There was a big thing that I had some questions, because as a school committee member, I do visit some of the schools. And I asked them, as a school committee member in West Warwick, how do you take the approach when you want to visit a school? So they said, well, we show up at a school, we say hello, they say hello, we sign in, we do our thing, they say see you on the end, they, when they're done, they sign out and they leave. So I said, in some of the questions I asked, they looked at me and said, well, why are you asking me this? And I said, well, I'm a big, believer in going to schools, checking things out if there's issues, and they needed no escorts, everything was open, walk-ins were welcome, and it was always a team effort. The school committee mentioned. Where here, we have a policy where we just can't walk into a school, we have to give notice, and, you know, and I have to be escorted around the schools when I enter a building, whether it's by the principal, whether it's by administration. So I thought that was huge. That was huge, and so that was a big thing that hit me also. We went into the high school. High school is attached to the middle school. While we were visiting the high school, there was a production going on. It was the arts and the music. And when me and Mr. Tyler were in the hallway talking with the high school principal, all of a sudden we see these middle school kids run by us, and they're all decked out in these nun outfits. They were all nuns, so they were doing presentation in the auditorium. So me and Mr. Tyler, we peeked in, we saw a little bit of it, we came out, and as we were talking with the principal, I said, wow. I said, look at that. You know, they were all decked out. They were doing this huge presentation. I mean, they were decked out from head to toe. They had the little nuns, black shoes, everything. Now, again, this hits me because I'm a big fan of the arts and music. I'm a big fan of well-rounded children. So as we were just talking with the principal, all of a sudden Mr. Sheehan comes in and he says, okay, it's time, because we were on pretty much 40 minutes. We tried to move along because we wanted to see a lot of things. So I just happened to turn to him. I go, with the funds that you don't have, I go, where do you get the funds for look at this production? He looked at me and he goes, what funds? He goes, we don't have any funds. What he did was he said that he went to the surrounding communities and he got a grant through the YMCA. And that's how he maintains the arts and the music. And I said, because that's a big thing for me. And I said, you maintain the arts and the music? He goes, because kids need to be well-rounded. And that is part of their education. So, of course, that hit me again. So I was like, okay. So that was one thing that I really enjoyed about speaking with him about the arts and the music. The other thing, too, while we're at the high school, and I know, Mr. Tati, you might want to touch on this one, especially with the BYOD. That was a big one that we were like, BYOD. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think
know you
the
really
BYOD is a bring your own device. It's a way that the West Warwick Public Schools have started. They realize technology is very important for the kids in education nowadays, but they don't have the funding as well as we don't to supply every child with that. So they come up with policies like 2 years in advance on how these kids were going to interact in the classroom with them, the rules, the do's and don'ts, you will. But they're able to bring in their own laptops, iPods. I just thought that was a very innovative way to get technology into the school when the funding will not support full technology. And I think that the foresight that they used to make sure that they had the policies, they said it took almost 2 years for the policies because they brought it out to the community at large. They brought it up to their city council. It was a lot of input into this, policies to make sure they were kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So I think that's a pretty good foresight to make sure that there's strong policies and rules in place before you implement something of that nature. But I did feel that that was an outstanding way of implementing technology into the schools. So.
Right. So I wanted you to touch base on that. Regarding the staff, when we spoke to staff members, we spoke to teachers, students. We were in a room with the principal, and the big thing was longevity. The working relationship was phenomenal. Highly qualified staff, because Mr. Sheehan said he makes sure that all his professional development days are focused around your responsibility, what you need to be successful for. So if you're a para, if you're a teacher, in whether it's special education, you're the athletic director, he made sure that professional development was made for you to succeed, to make sure it was about you. So I thought that was really, he supported the teachers, his staff, and I just thought that was a great quality. So, let's see, the unions, they spoke about how with his unions, he sits at the table. He's the one that sits at the table. He doesn't send in his administration. He sits there and he lays it all out and says, here it is. This is where we need to go. This is where we need to be. This is what we need to do to succeed. And a lot of the feedback was he never gives up. He's open and honest, and if they're going back and forth, he goes, I'm not leaving here until we can agree. He says, we need to make this work. It's about the kids. We need to make it work. So he will not leave the table, and he will never give up, because there's a way to make it work, because the bottom line is, it's about the kids. So I thought that was a great relationship between him and his unions. We did speak to the PTO parents, well, a parent of the PTO. We didn't speak to a whole huge PTO. And they said that he's always available, he's open. They always know what is happening in the schools. And there was an example that they said that they had to close one of their schools. So I can imagine, because I know when, a couple of years ago they wanted to close one of ours, and they said that was probably the most difficult thing that had to happen in the district. And he answered every question. He made himself available. He said, I will not move forward until every question and every parent's concern was taken care of. And they said that he did that. And he had meeting after meeting after meeting, and he explained why. He put it out there as, this is why we need to close the school. These are the reasons. And the parents in that said, by him laying it out and being transparent, he said that they said that they knew why. They knew why it had to happen. It wasn't something they wanted, but they realized that together, that's what they needed to do. And everything when, and of course, we went to lunch, we went off-site, we went to lunch, and everything, talking with Mr. Sheehan, it was never about I. It was always about team. It was always about we. It was about us. It was never I. And so that's the experience that I had in West Warwick. If you want to,
I think he did a great job on the
wanna add
overview.
something?
I think just for anybody that hasn't been following the situation, of course, we always want to have good relationships with your unions. But I think more important is when we're talking about this, we're talking about West Warwick having a funding cut of $10 million over 4 years. So you really need to have a good relationship with your unions if you're going to make that happen. So I just wanted to add that part to it.
Yep.
I think that's important. Does anybody in the committee have any questions about the site visit to West Warwick?
I just have a quick one, and I know, and I'd be happy to answer this question. I don't know that Mr. O'Neill or myself reported on it with regard to New Bedford, but was there any discussion of any potential weaknesses or criticisms that any of the stakeholders in West Warwick might identify as a legitimate criticism of Mr. Sheehan during his 6 or 7 years in West Warwick?
Not that I got. I don't think there was any criticism except maybe for the part of he's pretty well sticks by his guns, that he doesn't really deviate from what he says he's going to do. He's hard with that, and I think maybe part of that negative was that they, if anything, that they offered the old union leaders were kind of being against what he was trying to implement into the school system with that type of a budget cut. And basically, he put the names out on the table. Well, these are the people that will be laid off. So the newer members did not find that acceptable. They basically took the older leadership right out because they still wanted to be vested in their schools. But I think that if that was the one negative, they would say that, yeah, he's very strong-willed, and if he says he's going to do something, he does it, and usually doesn't deviate unless there's absolute good reason. So I don't know if that's a negative, but...
Well, I would sounds like just sort of the normal friction that would go along with leading a school district during a budget crisis and a time of concession.
Yes,
And and regarding the unions, when we sat down too, I mean, they did say, there are times where we're like, we're not happy with this, but we knew it had to be done because we wanted to stay together. We wanted to be family. We knew if that we didn't, compromise, that we would have, and I think it was 25 that they would have had to lay off. And even himself, 40. Was it 40? 40. Oh, I'm sorry, 40. And he himself sat at the table and said, I'm taking a pay cut, because this is what I want to keep us together. It's family. So he said he took a pay cut, and this is why, why we need to do it. And they decided whether, it was the no raises, whatever it was, but they did not want their 40 to be laid off, and they wanted to stay together. And they feel it was extremely beneficial, and that's what they know they needed to do. And I think it was he's been there 5 years? 5 to 7? 7 years. And since he's taken over, they have stayed above water, and they've been, their scores have gone up. they've done it. So. Oh, and the last thing, I'm sorry, the last thing I do want to say is that there were staff members, administration said, if I could pick up, I'd go with him tomorrow. If you choose him, you know what? You won't, you look back. And if, you know what, if that happens, I would pick up and I would love to go with him if I could. So pretty much staff and that said, you know what, we'd love to follow him. He's done wonders. Every time we did go in a meeting, they all were like whispering and saying, we tried to say, he's bad, he's no good, because they all tried to say, stay away. But they said, we know, he needs to move on if that's his choice, and that's what they said. So they all, unbelievable. It was just an unbelievable experience. I wish, honestly, that I could visit more districts to see the difference and to see, just like the BYOD, like that was huge. Like that was an eye-opener. We just thought that was, a great concept. And 2 years before trying to implement it, you put in your policies to bring it forward, and now it comes to fruition. So, yep, I think I'm good.
Good job,
Tried
thank
to
you.
give everything I could.
Okay. At this time, I'll be entertaining any motions that the committee would like to put forward.
Alrighty. Paperwork.
Can I just ask a question?
Dave, go ahead.
I'm assuming that the motion that would be likely to be offered at this point would be a motion to appoint one of the two candidates as superintendent. Is there any value in discussing why the other candidate is, or maybe perhaps there isn't? I don't know. I didn't know if you wanted to do go around the room just to compare and contrast,
Yeah.
or
No,
go right to the motions.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm just thinking, my thought process was that we get some type of vote out here, then we open it up for discussion and have every member discuss the viability of either candidate or one candidate, whatever,
Sure.
whatever you want to talk about. Yes, but I think we owe it to the public at large, to as their elected officials, to give them our personal feelings on each one.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And
Because,
I think that can certainly be done at the discussion stage of a
Exactly.
motion. I just wanted to put it out there.
Okay.
Barbara?
I'll make a motion then that the Attleboro School Committee employs Mr. Kenneth Sheehan as our next superintendent of schools.
Second.
Actually, hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You'd have to amend that motion because the motion would have to state on it pending successful contract negotiations. I mean, we can't,
Okay,
you know what I
so-
mean? We can't appoint, we're entering negotiations
Okay,
with them.
so
So
I
if you
make-
just want to amend it to adding the
To add
word
at the end, pending successful contract
negotiations.
negotiations.
Is that okay? Second
Yep.
then? Okay.
Second.
So we have a motion that has been seconded. So now, discussion. Barbara?
I don't mind starting. Mr. Chair, I'm ready to move forward with this selection. I was ready at our last meeting, but I do feel like, as Mr. Murphy stated, that it's our responsibility, if any school committee member has any concerns, to explain them to the fellow committee members and to the community why they don't feel that Mr. Sheehan would be the right fit for this position. I know I was very impressed with Mr. Sheehan's knowledge of the numerous trade skills that play right into our career and technical education program, and this is something you don't find in many superintendents. Mr. Sheehan's answers regarding advanced placement and honors was also impressive. And the fact that he sees the need for prerequisites in these areas as a necessity shows he's looking towards challenging our students, but making sure they're ready for this and not set up to fail. So I found that very important. I also did some extra research on my own. I actually called Dr. Azar's, some people that were PTO members, parents in the area, and also Mr. Sheehan's. And I do want to say that Dr. Azar's qualifications were very impressive, and I know that he'll succeed in whichever avenue he chooses. But I was very impressed by the responses from parents in regards to the way the schools were run in West Warwick, and again, or having that $10 million taken from the budget over the 4 years, how they said he did wonders with that school. And I did reach out, like I said, to PTO members' parents. I talked to special education parents and ELL parents, and it was just, they were like they had nothing but praise for him and how the process works in that school. And now that we have a full-time permanent special education director in a position here, I think they would complement each other in that area based on the responses that I received. I think that Ms. McCarthy and Mr. Sheehan will work very well together to make sure that Attleboro reaches the level it needs to in those areas also. So that was just, like I said, my follow-up and how I feel in regards to supporting Mr. Sheehan for this position. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Bill?
Mr. Chairman, I had the pleasure of spending the day with each of the candidates, along with yourself and Mr. Murphy, when they visited Attleboro, and had the ability to watch them interact at the different schools and with the different staff. And I don't doubt that either one of the two finalists have the experience that they would certainly bring things to Attleboro. I don't doubt that. My concern, just watching the interaction, I wish I had seen, I guess, in their interaction what you and Mrs. Furtado had seen down in West Warwick here in their interactions, but I didn't. And I understand, you know, that's his home turf, and this is not. I think my two biggest concerns, however, are some of the answers to some of his questions that I think he should have been a little more prepared for. As part of his interview process, he was asked what would he consider to be one of his weaknesses or a fault in his 30-plus years of education and in his career. And this is a pretty standard question that, you know, anyone being interviewed for almost any job is going to come up on. And for him not to be able to really state that he could think of something that he wished he had done differently, or, you know, couldn't really come up with a fault, it really kind of bothered me. It kind of struck a little bit of a nerve and just made me be a little concerned. And then I think it was during the afternoon session where the people could come and ask questions at the mini auditorium. There was a question that was asked of him about who he considered to be a mentor in his career and in his life. And, you know, I mean, most of us would say something like, you know, one of our parents or grandparent or maybe a favorite teacher or something to this effect. And his answer, again, bothered me that he didn't really have one. And, I mean, we're potentially looking to hire a superintendent, and one of the big things that they're going to do is they're going to be a mentor to all of our young teachers to make them be more experienced teachers. They're going to take our experienced teachers and take them up to the next level of possibly, you know, administration. And so him not really thinking that he had a mentor, I'm sure he did, but again, just that answer, I think, kind of bothered me. And again, just kind of call it a red flag, for the lack of a better word. I've hired a number of people, both for myself and for other organizations that I'm involved in. You know, you make mistakes sometimes. You know, you look back and say, geez, you know, if I had known then what I know now, I wouldn't have hired this person. And I'm just having that feeling with Mr. Sheehan. You know, I think, you know, when I first read his resume, I mean, it's a very impressive resume. Some of the things that he's done, some of the things that you've talked about that they did down in West Warwick are great. But I'm having that feeling about, you know, he has a very strong personality. I guess I was looking for a little humbleness, and I didn't see any. And this is it's a position that's a very personal, you know, you're looking for a very personable person in this position. I mean, yes, you need a strong hand at times. So those are my concerns, and I guess I'm not quite sure I'm ready to vote in favor of Mr. Sheehan tonight. So,
Thank you, Phil. Chris?
My concerns echo Mr. Larson's to a great extent. You mentioned that he was strong-willed and You know, when he sort of lays down what he wants to do, that's what he's going to do. And again, I wish I had seen the Sheehan that you guys saw when you were down there, because I didn't see that in this room. He came across, to me, authoritarian, I think, would be a good word. And in West Warwick, which is a much smaller community, that might play okay, but I can't see that working out well for us here at all. I think we're a much more diverse community than West Warwick, and I think, all right, you know, the ideas around this table, just the 9 of us on any given issue are very different, and I suspect that we're going to see real personality conflicts and problems resulting from them when we get into the nitty-gritty of running the school system with Mr. Sheehan. That's my thought right there.
Thanks, Chris. Ken?
First, Bill, I'll agree with you. His answer to that particular question where he failed to fill objective, I put a big minus on that one. I think what he might, thinking about it back, I think what he might have been trying to say is that failure is never an option for him. I do agree that wasn't the best advances, but besides that, I really have not found much fault with him. I like I feel that he does have an open communication style. I know he's got vast experience. We all know that. 39 years in education, 33 in administration. I think he's got a strong relationship with the school committee, and that's evidenced by the chair's recommendation and the members we've heard about tonight as well. I do see solid leadership skills, but one of the biggest things I like about him, and I always kind of come back to it, is it's good to have a superintendent with budgetary know-how. Now, as Mike mentioned, he's worked in a tough time. 6 years, his budget went from 54 million to 47 million. So, doing the quick math, it's basically a little over $1 million down a year. It's tough to work in when we're only getting, in our particular case, we only get an extra 2 million here. We're going at least up in the last 2 years. He's looking at a budget that's going down year after year. He was able to sit at the table himself, mind you, himself sat at the table with the union. He was able to negotiate with the teachers. As Brendan mentioned, he did take a pay cut himself, and then he kept the schools running. He kept the schools running. That's not just running, but running well. He implemented full-day kindergarten, which he had the foresight to explain to his school committee at the time that you could actually get increased funding by implementing full-day kindergarten. So it's not even a detriment to put in this expense now, because in the long run, you actually bring more money to the system. That kind of forward thinking impressed me. I think one of the best, doing the research on him, and he kind of mentioned is one of the best stories that I read about him, and that he mentioned in his interview, was that his city the municipal council took away funds from their school. Now, as in Mass, Rhode Island, similar, the state mandates how much money you have to give, and he sued his municipal government. He said, you're not taking this money away from the school department, you're not taking this money away from the kids, you're not taking this money away from the teachers, you're not taking it away from the schools. And to me, that shows his strong personality. It shows really just backbone that I think would be a great fit in Attleboro. When it comes down to it, I think we all have to be fiscally savvy, but in the end, it's the school committee's job to get what we need to provide the best schools for our kids. And I'm throwing my support behind Mr. Sheehan because I think he's the superintendent to do it. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Ken. Brenda?
And Ken, when you mentioned that, I think of dedication, and again, it goes back to the kids. And Mr. Lawson, it's funny because when you brought up kind of like that mentor, because usually you're like, usually you know someone who either mentored you or someone you looked up to. But I'll be honest with you, when I was watching the tape, because I could not attend the auditorium interviews, or questions and answers, I should say, I had to rewind it and watch it again, because I was like, well, what do you mean? Because usually it's, a parent, a grandparent. And when I watched it, to me, what I took from it and what he stated was, there were so many people involved in his success that he's like, I really can't say it was one person. And that's when I kept watching it, and I'm like, is that what he said? Because again, I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, you usually have some kind of mentor. And when I did, that is what I received from him. He's like, you know, I really can't, he couldn't pinpoint it on just one person, because throughout his whole education experience, he had so many people that the way that I took it, what he was presenting was it compiled, and that's who made him today and why he was doing his, you know, doing what he does best. And everything that that you hear from him, it all comes down to whether, you know, he's, you know, looking at a budget that needs to be for the kids, whether, you know, he went to his municipal council and said, listen, you're not providing. It's about the kids. It's about the schools and the kids who sit in front of those teachers every day. And that's what I got from him. And like Ken said, you know what? Sometimes you're going to have that friction, and that's okay. But in the end, our job is to make sure we have a budget. And our budgets are pretty razor thin right now. And to me, that impressed me, because we need a budget, because we have more diversity. We have ELL students. We have special education. I mean, Attleboro's district has changed in the many, many years. And we need a budget that is going to make sure that our kids get that. The needs taken care of, the teachers in front of them, technology. I mean, we just spoke about technology actually in the finance meeting tonight, how we are 5 years behind in technology, but in 2 years, we need to be up and running for, in 2015, I think you mentioned it, for Park, which is the new MCAS. I don't even really, we don't,
Basement.
I don't think any, I know, but that is just a whole, you know, different spectrum. So we need that. And 5 years ago, that's what we should have been gearing toward. And Mr. Sheehan's vision is looking forward, but making sure he's implementing something now. So when we reach that forward or that year or two, it's there. And we don't have to go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do, and scramble. And that's what I saw. And I'll be honest with you, you know, my word would be, instead of authoritarian, how you mentioned, I was like, geez, seems a little cocky. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was like, ooh, I don't know, you know. And, but again, I had the advantage to go to his schools to see what, you know, it was about. And I use the word cocky, but I'll have to say I use it in a good way, because everything either I asked or what he provided or what his school district was, you know what, he puts his money where his mouth is. His district is where they are because he put his money where his mouth is. And that's, I just think he's sure of himself, he's got the education, and he can sit there and tell you, I will bring you to this next level. And I think he's one that's, you know, that's his word. And he will bring us to that level, and I honestly believe that. So that's where I can see your point, Mr. Lawson. But however, I just think that he would be, he'd be phenomenal. I think he will move Attleboro forward, and it's our job as elected officials to make sure he does do that and what we as a committee and a community want him to do. So, you know, I did have some hesitations, and I will mention too that I spoke to staff in the district that have actually had, who actually worked for Mr. Sheehan. And what they said to me is, you know what, he can lead a district. He's a personable person. It's all about the kids. When the door shuts, it's all about the kids when he locks the door and goes home. However, he will make sure that, like Mr. Tyler said, if he makes a point and says this is what we're going to do, he will do it, and he'll make sure it goes to, you know, fruition. But he never ever makes a decision without going back and back. That's what they said. Always asking parents, asking teachers, asking staff, asking the janitorial, all the way to everyone. That is how he makes his decision. Everybody's at the table. And that's what I saw. So I did have those little reservations, but I think it's a good thing. It is a very, very good thing.
Barbara, I'll go back to you. All right. Terry?
I think what Brenda, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you're talking about his cockiness, I think it's more that he has the confidence.
Confidence, yeah. That's what
And
I
he's
said.
not afraid to put it out there.
Exactly.
You know, I did review the interviews and the forums, and I did read the resumes, and I did also do a little bit of what Barbara did. I reached out to some parents in both communities, and I heard good things about both of them. I mean, quite honestly. What impressed me more about Mr. Sheehan was when he talked about the whole child. You know, it's more about the whole child, the well-rounded person, not just about data-driven numbers. About, you know, accomplishing this because it's a mandate. You know, it was about them as a whole, about getting the kids ready for life, not just about scores. I think we have to look at that. I think we have to really change how Attleboro, you know, change the direction Attleboro is going in for the better. You know, work with what we've already done and accomplished and move on from there. After tonight's finance meeting, it kind of solidified things when we talked about the wireless network and the investment we need to make. And if he's already gone to the level in his community of doing that BYOD, you know, it tells me he's got the IT ideas that we need, because we're going to be faced with coming up with funds to support the kind of technology in our schools so that we can handle Park. So he's already kind of gotten his district there. So to have that, you know, knowledge and to have him have already made those accomplishments, I think just kind of adds to everything. I just really felt that between the two of them, although Dr. Azar was very good, I just saw the leadership skills and qualities in Mr. Sheehan for me.
Dave LaFrame, would you like to add something
Sure.
before Barbara Becker?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I think I'll just say just briefly, I did enjoy meeting and interviewing both candidates throughout the finalist stage of the process. I think everyone, obviously, we all have an obligation to exercise our best professional judgment in terms of which individual, or if one of these individuals is the right match at this time for the Attleboro school system. And I had, I think, what I would describe as significant reservations about both candidates. With regard to Dr. Azar, I felt like he demonstrated a real professional competence with regard to academic and curriculum issues. But I did not see throughout the interview process the attributes that I was looking for in order to be confident that he would have the ability to be the voice of a very large and complex organization like the Attleboro School District. I did not have that concern with regard to Mr. Sheehan. I think Mr. Sheehan, throughout the process, and if you review his credentials, which as I think Mr. Larson, perhaps others, said are impressive. I think he is qualified. I think he is a viable candidate to lead the Attleboro school system. What I would say is that throughout the extensive superintendent search process that this committee approved in September, I don't think any of our goals was mere viability. And that was one of the things that one of the reservations I felt over the last couple of weeks was whether or not we were choosing between candidates who were acceptable or candidates who were exceptional. And I think that my hope, certainly from the beginning, and my hope continues to be to this day, and it will certainly be my hope once a superintendent is appointed, that the candidate will be exceptional. And it's not just because, you know, everybody always wants to hire the best candidate possible, but it's because I do think that our school system, and maybe all school systems, are at a very critical juncture where either progress is going to be made at a rapid pace or school districts will regress. And I think that, and I know, Mr. Chairman, you've said often, have talked about the fragility of the progress that Attleboro has enjoyed in recent years. And I think that is at every piece of the process, throughout the focus groups, throughout the interviews, throughout the site visits, that was sort of the thought that was lurking in my mind, was that we've made, I think, significant progress. I think there's a broad consensus of that. I think that was clear throughout the research phase, that the Attleboro School District is a better place to enroll your children than it was 7 years ago. But that progress, it's not guaranteed that keeps going, and only if the right candidate is found. Just a couple of quick thoughts about Mr. Sheehan. As I said, I think he's certainly demonstrated the ability to be a strong leader. I have no doubt of his ability to be the voice and the face of the Attleboro school system. I think he'll be able to contribute to the development of a vision. I think he'll be able to articulate that vision with a strong voice. One of the focus groups, Mr. Chairman, you might remember this, as it was in this room, we had a former Attleboro Schools administrator, a very wise former Attleboro Schools administrator, who talked about the most important elements of a superintendent's repertoire being the ability to cultivate relationships. I believe the quote was relationships, relationships, relationships being the most important piece of a superintendency. I'm confident that Mr. Sheehan will be able to cultivate strong and constructive relationships, particularly with the school committee. I think he has demonstrated an ability to understand the perspective of school committee members and to deliver a message that will resonate with school committee members, and I think that relationship will be very strong. That also leads me to one of my concerns about Mr. Sheehan, is that I don't think any of us want a superintendent who specializes in merely keeping the school committee happy, because I think that the superintendent's role is not just to be the chief administrator of the school system, but to be the chief champion of education in the community. And sometimes that means saying to your boss, or in this case your 9 bosses, that this is what we need to do in order to move the school system forward. And that is one of my concerns, that if Mr. Sheehan becomes the superintendent, that I'll be inclined to make sure that we as a group hold him accountable for that. I don't want a superintendent who's just going to tell me or my colleagues what we want to hear. I want someone who's going to move the school system forward and cultivate greater opportunities for the students. I do have a few other thoughts, but I understand I've spoken at length at this point, so I'll yield the floor for the moment.
Important, Dave, so feel free.
No, I agree. I don't want to. I see Mr. Larson, his eyes are getting heavy, says I continue to drone on, so I wouldn't want to. But if I'll yield just, and if I could just have a couple more moments after anyone else chimes in.
Fran?
I think that we need to pick someone who has a strong personality, and it sounds like of the 2 candidates, they both are equally qualified up to a point. But I think we have a very diverse group here, and it would be a real challenge to whoever becomes the superintendent, and therefore I sort of lean towards Mr. Sheehan. He sounds like he's got he's going to be up to the challenge of leading the show here. And I think we need that. We want to continue to move in the direction that we've been going. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. I'm just going to add my thoughts, and I'll
Sure.
go back to the others. My thoughts are very clear, actually, on some of it. The one thing that really sticks out to me, I've been involved in union negotiations for a long time, and with these unions, I was very surprised when I partook in these negotiations that the superintendent was never involved in the negotiations. The superintendent always sent members of her administration, along with 3 members of the school committee that would sit on this committee. Things can get pretty tense, and we actually have a pretty good unions that we work with, so they're not as intense as other places. But the word always was, well, that's when feelings get hurt, and I'm the superintendent of the schools. Well, that doesn't cut it with me. Feelings do get hurt in negotiations. That's bound to happen when there's only so much money, and we want so much out of somebody, and they want to not give up something or maintain, and maybe the funding's not there. It's a tough job. In the end, if you're both looking at it like I think we do, it is for the kids. It is to live within our means. And I think we're able to go have a beer after the negotiations and say no hard feelings, and it's done. But you need a leader. A leader sits in those negotiations. The leader is the agent for the school committee, okay? There should not have to be a phone call from the assistant superintendent of the schools to the superintendent of the schools to find out if it's okay. That doesn't cut it for me. It never did. I thought it was kind of embarrassing. So the first thing I do when I talk to the union president in West Warwick, front and center guy, he sits right at the table with his school committee members, and no, I'm the guy, I'm the agent. You know, we're gonna deal with it here. Matter of fact, leave my administration out of it because I don't want them to share the hard feelings, because they're supposed to be kind of the buffer between the superintendent and the union. So I definitely agree with that terminology. The BYOD, like I say, I mean, it might sound simple. It's huge. It's absolutely huge to bring, to implement that type of policies and get that technology in the school. I think the teachers said it best. I'm sorry, the principal at the high school. We're scared of technology at our age. We're scared of it. We didn't grow up with it. We're scared of it. This thing can do things we could never thought of doing. I have to have my son do the DVR. I can't even do that. But my point being, we're kind of scared of it. Kids nowadays grew up with it. Lord forbid if they didn't have that technology, that's when they get scared. So, and we're supposed to be doing this for the kids, not for us. This is for them. And if we can implement something that puts them in a better place, and technology is a way to go, textbooks are expensive. I think they're like $200 a book now. I mean, so, you know, I think that's just like the forward-thinking ideas I think we need, in other words, to bring the district forward. Mr. Murphy was correct. I do think we're a very fragile school district. We have made great strides. I do believe we're kind of like a house of glass right now. We're not mortar and brick yet. We're still in a little glass frame. A couple of wrong thrown rocks, we could be in trouble, but we'll get there, I think, if we can all stay focused and, on what we're supposed to be here for. And I think Mr. Sheehan will be able to do that. I think he will be able to get the community to support some of the ideas he has. I believe he'll be more open-minded to the committee, but in the end, not afraid to tell us or the community or the municipal council, or whoever it may be, that I'm here for the kids, I'm doing a job, and you know, that's what my focus has to be on. So I do like when somebody's front and center about that. I think it's very important. And I think the most important thing, speaking about both candidates, I named the superintendent search committee, and I named 9 people to that board. They were as diversified committee as you could ever find, I guarantee you that. But they did the job. They did it in a timely, expedited fashion, not one argument. When I sat in this room here with our legal counsel and Ms. Nelson over here, I gave them very clear directives of what I expected out of them as a chairperson. I expected them to deal with things respectfully with each other, and with all information was to be confidential amongst the 9 people. I said I will not come back into this room unless I'm called by the elected chair of that committee or vice chair and told that there's a problem with one of the committee members. I will come in then and I will automatically remove that member. I've stated it to them all, so there's going to be no discretion about this. And the last thing I told them is, no matter how many candidates you get, which in the end we received 25 applicants to be the next superintendent of schools, I told them there's no number. I'm not telling you 3, I'm not telling you 5, I'm telling you one thing. Only forward to the full committee the names of the individuals that can bring this district to the next place. That's it. You've got your job descriptions that we reviewed. You have all the focus criteria that was brought to your attention. They brought forward 2 candidates, and both those candidates I think were excellent candidates, Dr. Azar and Mr. Sheehan. And I think, in my mind, I would be doing a total disservice even to the search committee that I put my full trust into, and they really showed why I should. They did a great job, and they forwarded 2 individuals that I think both would do a great job. But I do believe one does shine more than the other. But I appreciate both those finalists for applying for Attleboro and the job of the search committee. Barbara?
Basically, Mike, that's what I was going to state. When we put this together to do the search for the superintendents of Attleboro Public Schools, we reached out to MASC. MASC gave us a format. They said you should do focus groups, you should reach out to the community, you should develop this. So we as a committee developed what we were going to do, and committee member Mr. Furtado has that compilation of data. This data in here that was put together by staff at the schools, parents, PTO members, community members, city officials, any other local interest group in our district, put their concerns, questions out here, and it got put into this. This was our guideline. This is what was given to the search committee. So again, like Mike said, a search committee that was so diversified. We had teachers on there, union leaders on there. We've had parents, PTO members, ex-school committee members. So this whole group of search committee members went by what we as a district wanted to see in a superintendent of schools. This was not just what the school committee wanted to see. This is what the whole district of Attleboro wanted in a superintendent, in a leader. So based on that criteria, the search committee went forward and they said, if we don't have a candidate, not just viable, that is not the best to put forward for our schools, we're not coming back with anyone, and we're going to go back out and do another search. So based on hearing that from that group, and they brought forth 2 candidates that were exceptional. Again, my faith and trust is also in the work that they had done, in my own individual information that I gathered. And they brought forth 2 leaders. We need a leader in this position, a leader who we've heard, especially with Mr. Sheehan, it was we, my administrative staff, my PTO staff, not just me and I and my decision. So if he does come forth and he has a plan in place, he's already worked with his team. So he's not just expressing his own individual idea and that's it. He has worked with all different levels to say this is what is best for the children. And he brings that forth and he sticks to his guns. So I find that very impressive. And I, too, would like to thank the search committee again for what they did. And they stuck to the guidelines and the process that the district, that the city of Attleboro wanted in a superintendent. It wasn't personal. They went by that book, which, again, was composed by everyone had input. Anyone who attended the focus groups, filled out the surveys. Everyone was invited to do that. So based on that, like again, I said, this wasn't just a school committee choice. This was the district's choice. And I think Mr. Sheehan, he just outshined in all areas. And again, like I said, Dr. Azar was excellent too, and he will succeed, but I think what we need right now is someone like Mr. Sheehan to lead us and keep us in that forward progression. So, thank you.
But just to be fair, I just want to add that Mr. Murphy did compile all the comprehensive assessment material and put it all together into a beautiful assessment book. So Dave, I just want to thank you again for doing that. But yes,
And the cover was by Danielle Sharples of the class of 2013 is really the highlight of the book. But so thank you to her.
Right. The other thing too that I forgot to mention, and I have it on my phone here, is when I went to the schools. I looked and my first thing was, where's your mission statement? Where's your vision statement? And when I went into the schools, I didn't print them out, but there's one that, stuck out or whatever, is I took pictures of their vision and mission statement, which each school had one. And I'm like, oh, well, you don't have one like for, he goes, no. He goes, every school is different. It's, and every level is different, whether it's elementary, middle, and high school. And it's funny because I had to take them because, they were about, I could read one here, but you know what, it's just so, I'm not even going to go in there. I took pictures of 2 of them. And to me, I, just as a parent, just said, well, you're right. Because every child is different, whether they learn differently, who they are, their needs, their disabilities, their strengths, their weaknesses. So every school I went into, I was like, oh, there it is. And I click, because it was different at each school, because it's a different atmosphere, it's a different level. And I just thought that showed, I don't know, that impressed me. That just touched me as a parent, knowing that, you know what, you're right. Because it's not about, they're all the same, and they're all about data. It's about, again, going back to like what Terry mentioned, is well-rounded, the whole child. So that was another thing that I forgot to mention in my my walkthrough, was their vision and mission statement was right out there, and it was different at each school. And I was impressed by that. I really, really said, wow, that's different. And when he explained it, I'm like, you know what, you're right. You're right. They are all different. They're unique. They're our kids. They're our babies. They are our future. And you know what? He just holds them. I just feel that he holds them as every child is his. So I'm pretty much done. Thank you. And again, Dr. Azar, like I said, I think he will do well wherever he goes. It was a pleasure. I spoke to him on the phone several times. The people I reached out to had nothing but good to say. I wish him the best of luck. And you know what, I'll say it, I said it to both of them when I spoke to them on the phone. If I had 2 spots on the payroll, they would be my 2 that I would be able, if I could, to put them on the payroll at the Attleboro Public Schools. That's what I said to both of them. So I wished them both luck, said see 1 year's in the end, and so here we are. Yeah.
Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To go back to the comments that Ms. Crowe was making a moment ago about the comprehensive assessment, which, Mr. Chairman, I'll always be grateful to you for giving me the honor to serve as its author. That is the point of the comprehensive assessment, as was described in the search proposal that was made on September 24th, is to evaluate the Attleboro school system and to articulate the community's goals going forward. Part of the reason that I think the committee felt it was important to have that extensive research phase was that we didn't know how the search process was going to end. And you never do. Whenever you post a job, whatever it is, doesn't matter where in the hierarchy it is, whether it's superintendent or anywhere else, you never know whether or not you're going to find that individual who is the right match for the position at that time. So there was an element that we couldn't control. What we could control was to facilitate the most extensive research process that a school committee has engaged in recent memory. So that we had something that articulated where the Attleboro school system was at this time period and where the community felt like it needed to go. I think the report does that. I think the committee's 8-0 vote approving it speaks to that. One of the pieces in the report is the importance that so many stakeholders articulated with regard to having a district-wide vision and having a seamlessness that transcends each of the 9 school buildings and all of the programs. And having participated in the research process, the reasoning that was given as to why individuals and groups saw that as a evidence of progress within the school district was that it allowed for the individual attention that needed to be given to each student. I certainly agree with Ms. Furtado's statement that each school has its own identity. I think that's why we're familiar with terms like the Willett Way, and I'm not going to name any more because then I'm not going to name all 9s. But the fact that in each building there is, and this is also in the report, that each building feels that sense of building pride. I think that's one of the advantages of having strong neighborhood schools the way that we do. And I think that the fact that we've been able to couple that neighborhood school and that building pride with a seamless and district-wide vision, I think is, at least according to the participants in the research process, and there were a lot of them and they had various perspectives, one of the reasons that Attleboro has been able to see the progress that it has, and also why Attleboro is poised to be able to take on the challenges coming with some of those new assessments that all school districts will face in the coming years. If I could just run through a couple of other Mr. Sheehan points. I did feel as though his public forum performance on his district-wide, on his district visit was stronger than the formal interview he gave before the school committee. In particular, I thought, and I believe these are still online, so if anyone hasn't had the chance to look at them yet, they should certainly, I would encourage them to do that. The emphasis that he put on quality instruction and quality teaching. I felt like when he was speaking about that, that you could really see that quality teaching and making sure that each teacher is performing at his or her highest level was a real passion for him. And I thought one of the things that I found really encouraging was it seemed as though he might be able to be talked into possibly teaching a class or teaching an elective. And since the superintendent's office is in the high school, I think that would be something that, you know, if the schedule can be worked out, I think that would be good. Again, I don't know that Mr. Sheehan would want to do that, so I don't want to volunteer him for it. But I think it's something that it could be useful to the students and to the superintendent. He also talked about how in West Warwick he's made the recruitment of the best teachers possible to be a priority. I think that's, again, it speaks to the importance that he recognizes in making sure that we have the best teachers possible in front of students. We asked him the question as to what advice that he would give the graduating class of 2013 if we brought him in as the commencement speaker, which I don't think we're going to do, but if we did, he said that to remind them of the importance of family, being true to oneself, contributing to the community, and keeping an open mind to embrace the world's diversity. I think it may sound like an odd question. I don't think you get that too often in a job interview, but I felt like that it speaks to the type of vision you need to have if you're going to be in educational leadership. As I said, I think in his formal interview, I don't think he performed as well, frankly, as he did in the public forum. I think the most glaring example of that has already been cited by a number of committee members. In 39 years in public education, the question was, what is an example of failure and how did you respond and recover? So although I agree that I think he framed the response the way Mr. Parent said that he did, of saying that failure is not an option and he's not going to accept that, and I appreciate that. Somewhere over the course of those 39 years, he should have been able to name a failure. I did appreciate the fact that he spoke of the importance of, in his initial days as superintendent, distinguishing between his perception and reality. And I think particularly because some of the concerns that committee members have raised with regard to humility or a lack thereof, I think that is going to be an important piece of his administration, and I think that he'll need to make sure that he does not validate those concerns that were raised. And I think, you know, an example of humility is in, you know, your initial stages of a new job, learning the culture and learning what's working and what needs to improve. He did talk about extensively, and I think with good reason, the need to educate the whole child and offering a comprehensive educational experience for each student. It's important. I think what I would have liked to see a little bit more of it, and to some degree this was implicit, so I wouldn't really say this was a criticism. It was just a piece that I'd like to have further discussion with him at some point, is that, and again, this is referenced in the report as well, that there's a difference between having a substantive, disproportionate emphasis on test scores, and particularly with ELA and math, and having a disproportionate emphasis with regard to the communication of test scores with regard to ELA and math. I think that at times in this school district, in recent years, administrators have focused disproportionately on communicating the success of English and math, which has fed a perception, which some perception at times leads to reality, that there is a disproportionate focus on test scores. I think that we need to make sure that we're balanced both from a substantive standpoint and making sure that each child is having a comprehensive and holistic educational experience, and making sure that when we communicate our success, we don't reduce that success to mere test scores. And if that's all we have with regard to points of success, and I don't think it is, then we're not being as successful as we need to be. I guess the last thing I would say is that he certainly is well qualified. He certainly has the credentials. I think he has the potential to make a very positive impact in Attleboro. He is cited in one instance when asked specifically why he wanted to come to Attleboro. He spoke about the number of years that he has worked in Massachusetts. And again, it's 39 in public education, and a concern I have, and a concern I had going into this process, is we want someone who's going to be invested and committed to Attleboro in the long term. I don't know that you could I think you could reasonably infer that there may not be as much of a long-term commitment as we might like. I had that concern. Again, I don't think it's a disqualifier, but coupled with some of the attributes, particularly the humility piece that we're looking for. And again, it's not just because we want to be a superintendent. You need to be decisive. You need to be willing to be up front. You need to have the courage to stand by your position. So nobody is looking for excess humility by any means. But one of the attribute that came up in focus group after focus group after focus group was approachability. And I think in order to be able to attain that level of approachability that stakeholders across the district need, I think you need to be able to exhibit some of that. And that's something that, as one of the 9 people that he'll be reporting to, it'll be something that I would be looking for.
Can I ask you a question?
And I'll pause momentarily, and I apologize.
I just have a question for you. Could you kind of elaborate on why you're concerned about his investment of time?
I think I wouldn't elaborate much beyond what I've said, other than the fact that
Or clarify, maybe. I guess I'm not following where you're thinking that he's not invested time-wise.
I think in many of his responses, there could have been an articulation of goals that would be more forward-reaching and go further into. I think that the job of, we have hundreds of teachers and dozens of administrators to make sure that the school system is operating as it needs to on a daily basis. I think that at this level of leadership with regard to the superintendent and the school committee for that matter, I think that we constantly need to be cognizant of what type of school system are we going to, is Attleboro going to have 10 years from now? Is Attleboro going to have 15 years from now?
And I guess, so you don't feel that he would be here for the normal term of a 5 or 7 year superintendent like we typically
That's a
find?
question for Mr. Sheehan.
No, it was just a statement you made, and I just wanted to clarify, because you said that was a great concern you had. was his investment of time in the district.
I don't remember saying it was a great concern, but it was certainly a concern of mine, along with a number of others, that in the course of answering and responding to the questions at both the public forum and the interview, I would have liked to seen more of a long-term, forward-looking approach. Again,
Okay.
as I said at some point in these comments, that I don't see it as a disqualifier. I see it as on the looking at the totality of his presentation. That's where I would have liked to see a slightly greater balance. And I'm sorry. I'll take a breath. And again, I apologize if as Mr. Chairman said, this is a pretty important issue.
No, and I understand. I understand part of your concern. I think I know what you were getting at. Well, I think one of the things that really opened my eyes when we started this process is the average lifespan of a superintendent in the district being at 3.5 years. I would have never guessed that. But after watching the time commitment that it takes out of the superintendents, I think I do now.
Sure.
You know, it's just, but that is something, 3.5 years is the average, and that's a pretty low number. Go ahead, Brenda.
I mean, I just want to say to Mr. Murphy that I'm glad that he's seeing, because the consensus before that I didn't feel was that either candidate, but I'm glad that, you know, what you mentioned, that you could support of what you see that he actually, you know, can lead Attleboro. If that's what I'm looking at, that's what you're saying. Is that what basically, because you had a lot of good points of, you know what I mean, of Mr.
Thank you very much.
Sheehan.
I hope we're recording this.
So,
Ms. Furtado at
well, exactly. Well,
9:30
I just want, right.
April 2nd said that David Murphy was making a good
Right,
point.
exactly. Only because,
Set your DVR.
only because the consensus previously was we didn't.
929.
The feeling I was getting is that you didn't have either candidate on the you thought they were maybe just viable or they weren't the next leader. So now I'm seeing that, you know, I don't know if you pretty much you know,
Yeah,
is
I
coming
like
out
seeing
with
that
basically
discussion.
like,
Go ahead.
no, because no, I mean now you're bringing out some points that you could see, and I'm glad you've really like, you know, looked into, you know, what
Well,
Mr. Sheehan can maybe
Mr. Chairman, may I
bring to
respond
this
now?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
to this, but that was the consensus that I was getting previously, that you just didn't really feel there was a candidate at all between the two of
Okay,
them.
well,
That's all. I
yeah,
thought
don't-
that was.
Yeah, we just don't want to speak for Dave. He'll have his
Oh
vote.
yeah, no, but that's
Ideally.
what, you know.
No.
So I mean, I'm glad there was good points there. So. for
And,
Mr.
and,
Sheehan.
and I do appreciate that. I mean, what I would say is this. I have significant reservations about both candidates. I think that Mr. Sheehan is viable. This is the first opportunity I've had to articulate my views on both candidates, and my sense is, particularly since there is not a motion on the floor with regard to Dr. Azar, that I'm focusing my comments on Mr. Sheehan. I don't want there to be any confusion that I have some reservations based on his presentation. I think that he is, as I said from the beginning, he is, there's no question he's viable. I don't think there's much question that he has the credentials. But I don't think, as I said at the very beginning, that viability was our goal. Our goal is a top-tier superintendent candidate who will move the Attleboro School District forward. And I think that someone could absolutely reasonably conclude that Mr. Sheehan is that candidate. Frankly, and I said at the last meeting that I felt as though electing a superintendent and making this decision by a one-vote margin was unwise, and I felt like we owed it to whomever became superintendent for that person to begin his or her, but in this instance with the two candidates, his administration on a unified footing to the degree that that's possible. It is clear that there is going to be a majority who supports Mr. Sheehan. As Mr. Parent said in response to my concerns last time, a majority is a majority. I would note that the one thing every majority has in common in the history of democracies is that there's no such thing as a permanent majority. But his statement is true. A majority is a majority. And so, in light of the majority that has been formed, I think that the best thing that this school committee can do for the community is to unify and to make an unequivocal statement to our new superintendent that he has our support and we'll do whatever it is, whatever we can to help him. And that, ultimately, again, the voting does not take place in a vacuum. No vote takes place without context. And the context in which I'm casting my vote is that Ken Sheehan is going to be the superintendent of schools in Attleboro, and I'm going to be here to do whatever I can to help him.
Thank you, Dave. Bill?
I just, a little bit of a follow-up. I think we as a committee have a huge thank you that we owe, and I think some other people have already said it, to the people that participated in the survey and the focus group. I'd also like to add my thanks to the people that served on the search committee. I think they did a great job with what they had to do. I know there's some differences around the table, and that's fine, and whoever ends up being our superintendent, I think we'll all get behind and be looking to work with them. I don't think that changes our opinions, but I wouldn't interpret anyone's votes as somebody not willing to work with somebody in the future, so.
Thanks, Bill. Dave?
I would just say if anything I said implied that I would interpret it, I certainly, that's not the case by any means. My vote should be interpreted as a recognition that a majority has been put together to support Mr. Sheehan's election, and I think that my reservations are there. I will be expressing them to him in our first meeting, but I'll also be telling him that he's got that, the most important vote I've ever taken in my life is to elect him superintendent, and I look forward to working with him to lead the school system forward.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else? Bobby, repeat the motion, please.
Add that amendment on there. Okay, I make a motion that the Attleboro School Committee employs Mr. Kenneth Sheehan as our next superintendent of schools upon negotiating a successful contract.
That motion has been seconded. Discussion, a roll call vote. Ms. Potato?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Shanigan?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
No.
Ms. Zito?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
No.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
Ms. Corral?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler, yes. Mr. Kenneth Sheehan will become the next Attleboro superintendent of the schools pending successful contract negotiation.
Mr. Talley, I request that we adjourn the meeting, and I think it might be appropriate that you actually give a call to Mr. Sheehan. I know it's going to be in the media tomorrow. I know it may be live, but I think that would be maybe the best thing. And if you feel to also make a phone call to Mr. Azar. So I make a motion to adjourn for 10 minutes and then come back.
Unfortunately, I don't have my phone, so that's not going to work.
Oh, I
You
do.
can borrow mine.
I don't have their cell phone. They're on my
I
phone.
do, they're right
Brenda
here.
has them. Brenda has
Yep, that would be
everything.
I
great.
have them.
I also have.
Always
know.
does
Like the
everything.
secretary.
So I make a motion to adjourn.
Well, we're not, we're going to go into executive session to discuss strategies in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and not reconvene an open session.
Well, can I amend that and take a 10-minute recess?
we're gonna
before we
take a
do that?
10-minute break
Oh,
and
is
then
that
we'll
okay?
go
All
into-
right. So you need a second on that?
Second.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
this is the motion to go into executive session, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. We're not taking a motion to recess, are we?
No, we're just going to take a 10-minute recess because they have to we have to shut all the audio off anyways.
Okay.
And get everybody out of the room. So the motion has been seconded. Ms. Zito?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Parent?
Yes.
Ms. Corral?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler, yes. Ms. Potato?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Jennings?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Okay. Motion is passed.
More professionally have you than the news media.
And Judy, I mean, we can use